All right, I'm recording, George. You can go ahead and start, and I'll put a link in chat to the doc in a second as soon as I can get it shared. Almost there.
All right. So good morning, everybody. Totally unrehearsed. So let's just go forward. So my experience with ctcLink and tracking acquisitions work as it relates to Alma is there's a sort of CTC workflow that comes in where you create the library, I create a requisition. That requisition goes through an approval process, then it becomes a purchase order by the purchasing department. And once the purchase order is created, I submit an invoice to accounts payable. Accounts payable makes a voucher, issues payment, and reconciles. And the last thing I do is submit an invoice, and then things get out of, they're not in my hand. So I've created this sort of spreadsheet where I have the requisition numbers, requisition names, and just the process it goes through from creation to reconciliation. And I can't move this. This bar is in my way. There. So to track the information, I needed to have certain ctcLink permissions. One was for looking at budgets, one was looking at purchasing activity, and one was for looking at accounts payable activity. So to track expenditures, I think the first way we'll look at is we're going to look at budget details. And this is if you know your organizational chart strings, which are the budget information numbers. So I have a tile I created in ctcLink, but to get there, we can get there through the navigator. And that is under commitment control, review budget activities, and budget details. And here we select that, and then you get to your account information. So 508-1120 is subscriptions, and 11425 is a budget Kirsty manages, and the budget period. And this is for electronic subscriptions for all 3 colleges in our district have access to. We can look at our expenses here. And then we have each payment amount, vouchers, and payment dates, transaction dates. So this big 48,000, if we wanted to drill down and look at that, we would get to here and click on the voucher information and go to source entry. And here, this is our big EBSCO package that was paid on the 17th with this check number. So that is looking at budget information from a known chart field. Close that. Say okay. But if we just wanted to look at requisitions created and you say, I want to look at all the requisitions I created. There we can go through the navigator again. And this would be purchasing, requisitions, review requisitions information, and document status. And here in the description, find all the requisitions I created. And say if we look at this, we can see from the requisition, it got turned into a purchase order. It was received and a voucher was created. Voucher. And here in the more details, we can also see the approval history. So right now, this voucher for payment is kind of stalled in the business office. Then it'll go through approval processes here. So they may not act on it until the 15th. All right, what else? And again, there are many different pathways to get to this sort of information. I mean, so if you know a purchase order number, and I'll go back here. If I wanted to look at my purchase order number 1800. I could go to the navigator. That would be under purchasing, purchase orders, review, PO information, and again, document status. And my PO number contains 1800. And then we can see that actually a payment was issued. Here, we can look at the payment. that was paid with this number, but it hasn't been reconciled yet. All right, I'm gonna pause and see if there's any questions.
George, I want to toss in a comment about the reconciliation and payment clear date, because this was something that we just found out yesterday. So a couple months back, our finance person had told me, if you get into this page, you want to look for the payment clear date, and that will tell you that a check has been cashed. So if you have a payment date but no payment clear date, that might indicate the check got lost, or the vendor never received it. And so I'd been relying on that, and George had been relying on there being a reconciliation date to know that, yep, it's been paid, the payment has been received, it's all good. And we found out yesterday from our finance person that the reconciliation is some kind of process that our finance folks do, and it can be pretty cumbersome. So they've temporarily stopped doing it. So you might want to talk to your finance people to find out, are they at a point where they're doing any reconciliation? Can you use a payment clear date and reconcile date? Or are you not, is your institution not using that yet?
And as you can see in my tracking, the last reconciliation date I was able to find was back in October.
And George, Amy had a question in the chat. She asks, how do you send invoices to your accounts payable office? Do you email PDFs, or do you send through Alma or directly in ctcLink somehow?
Well, when we first started, when I create a requisition, I attach invoice and payment information to the requisition that purchasing uses to create the purchase order. But there is a gap or some sort of what purchasing creates in the PO doesn't, accounts payable cannot see. So I have to, once the PO is created, I email a copy of the invoice and usually a tax exemption certificate to accounts, directly to accounts payable. So when I get back, so that's this step of the workflow where my invoice is submitted directly by email to our accounts payable people. And yes, I do create a requisition in ctcLink. I can show you one of those. Boom. Close this one. Go back here, return to search, go home. So I guess I could look by my name, but when I create requisitions, they all begin with Seattle Central College lib, SCC lib. And this one is a requisition for our science that I made wrong, so I put a halt on it. But the business office or purchasing are unable to delete it, so it's kind of in limbo and it's waiting there. And then at the requisition level, you can also see approval chains. And this is when I stopped allowing approvals. So it got through one portion of the approval process, but I clicked a box and stopped the further approval. And it's just sort of a bad requisition that I created that is sitting in limbo. Are there any other questions or? And I can show you this too. Our Seattle colleges created this, it's called Fin Query, and it gives kind of a big picture view of ctcLink information. So if we look at expenses and the fund, not the fund, we're looking for the department. Account 5020. We got this. So this kind of gives just a big picture of by month of expenditures in ctcLink. And I imagine it's very useful for like deans and vice presidents and everything. But it's nice to know 9485. By the right budget. 948024. 948024. So it's nice to know my Alma budget here is balanced in ctcLink from a big picture. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing, I guess. I don't know. Would anybody like to see other things?
I'll just say, George, that must be very satisfying to see those numbers match. Huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I missed, what is that? What is that? Let's see, I'm looking at, okay, so you've got months.
Yeah, the fiscal year month. So 1 is actually July, 2 is August, and so forth.
So is that for last, or I guess still current fiscal year?
Yes.
Oh, so that's pretty, yeah. So even more satisfying to be toward almost to the end of the fiscal year and see matching numbers. It's probably easier to achieve at the beginning of a fiscal year.
Yeah. I mean, if you look,
Do another one just to see, just,
oh, no, they'll be totally off and I'll ruin my reputation. There's not a lot of stuff. This district budget is, maybe 20 big bills.
and what general, I mean, and of course, our experience with ctcLink and, yep, and Alma and Primo is still fairly new, but will you generally, if and when it's out of budget, and anybody can answer this, not just George, but if and when it's, those don't sync up, does the number in Alma tend to be, the amount spent in Alma tend to be bigger than what's showing in here in ctcLink, just because of the delay of checks going out?
Looking at 43.
And actually, I missed on the ctcLink side, can you look at, is that checks that have actually been cut, or is that requisitions? Anticipated spend.
Let me go back there. So on here,
Yeah.
these are actual expenses.
Yeah, okay. Do you ever compare, is there on the ctcLink side, can you look at requisition totals or purchase order totals versus, or is that what you're looking on the ctcLink side? Do you consider those equivalent?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, it may be that it's the, that on the ctcLink side, there may not be a differentiation there, or if there is, there may be multiple different reports you need to look at.
So like on this side, we got 55, 99, 48 on the ctcLink side, but 7,000. So I'm off by $1,000.
So I think the report thing, or the report platform that George is showing, I think that's something that our IT people kind of set up specifically. And I think it's a Tableau shell kind of sitting on top of the ctcLink data. And based on discussions that I'm hearing from our finance people, like the reports in ctcLink are kind of similar to Alma Analytics, and their experience in ctcLink at this point is really similar to our experience with Alma Analytics at the beginning of, like, we're just trying to figure out what fields we need to create the reports that give us the data that we want, and what filters we have to use. And so sometimes I've heard the finance people say, the IT folks have created a report, but the finance folks have noticed, oh, there's something missing from the report that they expect to be there, that they know is somewhere in the underlying data. So we're still figuring out how to get the reports and how to get them to be accurate.
Yeah, that's a great point, Kirsty, yeah, and you can see just from the URL on this page that it's not PeopleSoft, and you can tell just by looking at it, I guess. So it's actually, this may not reconcile. There's a possibility that this doesn't reconcile accurately with ctcLink, because it's a report from the ctcLink data. So it's like, so, yeah. And if Alma doesn't match this, there's still a possibility that it matches what's actually in ctcLink, right? So that's just
Yeah,
an interesting twist.
Like, for example, if George went into the way he showed us the first time, when he went into the, like, that budget area, or the budget details, it's possible that if he, exported all of everything from that into an Excel spreadsheet and added it up, it might balance with Alma. I don't know.
Yeah, and here's a more specific question about reconciliation, I guess. Have you noticed any issues with taxes being calculated differently by ctcLink versus what you do in Alma?
The tax my experience with the tax calculation has always been that it's correct. It's more a question of, does the tax get calculated when it needs to be, or does it get calculated when it doesn't need to be? Our purchasing folks have asked us, when we submit a purchase requisition, to say really clearly in the header and in the information whether something is tax exempt or whether something is not tax exempt. Because so much of our stuff is tax exempt because we're buying content that students use. And so sometimes they assume that it is tax exempt when it actually isn't, or vice versa.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking specifically if like on your requisitions, you actually include the tax amount, and then does ctcLink use that literal tax amount, or does it get recalculated based on line item amounts?
Our purchasing department adds in the tax amount to the purchase order when they create the purchase order. Yeah, so that's something that they do. We don't add it to the purchase requisition.
I got you.
Yeah, so when I create a requisition, I always include that, online digital product tax exempt, and attach a tax exemption form to the requisition as well. And then when I submit the invoice, I submit the invoice to accounts payable with the tax exemption form.
And George, you have to put a lot of the same language into your requisitions. Do you have that saved somewhere? Do you have like stock phrases saved in a Word document somewhere?
I can show you, I think. So I just edit this every time. So here's my header comment. I always put in everything. And then the description in the creation. Then a bunch of other information in another comment box. So that's kind of my boilerplate language I use in creating requisitions. And haven't answered Amy's question in chat. Does anybody else have anything like this at their colleges?
But I saw Karen and Melinda are on the call. Spokane has been on CTC Link quite a while. I don't know if they would have anything, but maybe you guys know if Spokane's doing anything like that. I'm just trying to think of the possible suspects of, yeah, Pierce could be another one that they've been on CTC Link a while and have IT resources.
At Spokane or at SEC, I don't get into the purchase recs area. I get into the just the reconciling.
So you're more at,
How do you do your purchase recs then? Or is it a different workflow at Spokane? Or maybe you don't, maybe they don't.
Yeah, we don't. I don't. We do. Okay, let me back up. I used to do the purchase recs when we first started. I don't do it anymore. Anything that needs to be purchased through a PO, Melinda, that goes to who? Melinda, are you still on?
Yep, I'm still on. It goes to
It
Paula.
goes to Paula, doesn't it?
Yeah, they go to Paula and Paula does all of this
Yeah.
CTC Link. And so basically anytime I need to know something specific, hey, has this been paid? I actually go to Paula. And so, and she's not really, she's part of the library, but not part of the library in that sense. She's the administrative assistant for our dean,
Yeah.
who is over multiple areas.
Yeah, gotcha.
So I just go through the reconcile statement. That's where I go because I do all my purchasing on a P card. If we need to do any PRs, that goes usually from Melinda to our admin assistant, and she does it all. I will probably be retaking it over here at some point. I just don't know when.
yeah, so the P card stuff. So
Yeah.
a lot of the stuff I showed earlier was based on creating requisitions.
Uh-huh.
And the P card stuff is should already be configured at each college.
Mostly, yeah. Should be.
And that all our P card transactions get sucked into CTC Link from the credit card bank.
Correct.
So
I have a kind of a step-by-step process or procedure written out. It's a little rough, but I can clean it up if you guys need it for the reconciling, if anybody needs it.
yeah, Seattle colleges sent out a step-by-step procedure.
Nice.
And
My own. We never got one.
well, I don't know if different colleges have different requirements for reconciling.
Yeah.
Like I have to update the chart strings to which budget's going to be paid. Yep. And I have to justify my comment and attach proof of payment.
Correct.
I'll say that's this is interesting for me to see. This is fairly sophisticated and seems like a step forward with PeopleSoft. This ability to use P cards and those transactions being automatically brought in for reconciliation. That
Yeah, it's due by the 10th of every month. Do you do the purchase details as well? Does anybody use the purchase details tab?
Purchase here.
So if you look at that, we use it and we go to category so that they know, are we buying books? Are we buying office supplies? Are we buying paper? And we have to put that in as well. And then we also have to say whether it's tax included. Yeah. And
We
so
tried,
Huh?
we at Seattle colleges, we tried this and people were not doing it correctly. And the business office got frustrated and they said, they just, at the end of every month, they send out a spreadsheet and that lists all your transactions and you just have to say yes, add use tax, no, don't add use tax, and they take care of everything behind the scenes.
Wow. Nice.
People could not figure out.
So if you click on that, and then you click on tax applicability, it's always going to be used. I'm going to remember. Use tax applicable, tax destination is your, whoever it is. And then it automatically adds it.
Yeah.
And if you don't, if it is tax exempt, then you do sales tax use or sales use task, and item is exempt, and then you're done. That's
Yeah.
it.
For some reason, we as an institution could not figure that out, and
Huh.
we're going back to pre-PeopleSoft time.
Yeah.
To,
The truth is, so if the tax was already paid, because I buy a lot through Amazon, and so we always pay the tax
yeah,
via Amazon. So we don't have to do anything because it it goes straight to tax paid. So the only time we have to go to that box, sales tax applicable, is when a vendor does not charge us tax, and then we have to add it there.
yeah.
That's
So
it.
of my 12 transaction this month,
Yeah.
Elliott Bay and Amazon
Yeah.
have tax on the invoice.
Yep.
EBSCO, this one's an ebook, so it's tax exempt.
Yeah.
These are newspapers, which are tax exempt,
Mhm.
and this has tax on the invoice.
Yeah. Yeah. So if they're tax exempt, you just go into that purchase details and do it that way. Over one more.
Over one more.
Purchase details. Oh, yep. And then go to sales use tax. And then item is exempt.
Yep.
And then you're done. And then you
Yeah.
put that in your little note field that says item is tax exempt, and that's it.
Yeah, so in my comments here,
But if they don't, if they don't charge you tax, and you should have paid tax, that's when you add that.
yeah, it's different workflows at different institutions.
Correct. Yes.
what they just more basic, but you can see in the URL that we're on ctcLink at this point. Just an aside comment. I'm surprised these PeopleSoft screens look as plain as they do. they're not, they're not as polished, say, as the stuff inside of Alma.
No, it's really hard to navigate. And the fact that you cannot, the fact that you can't see the whole line, that you have to use the horizontal scroll bar is really also frustrating.
Yeah, and I some of that may be that, there's
We tried to set it up right, and you can't do it.
PeopleSoft is very, the implementation is much more complex than, say, Alma, which all of the workflows are built in, whereas in PeopleSoft you kind of have to build your own, and I think that may be one reason why the screens aren't as rich. And then in chat, a question about P cards. Ryer says that Centralia is dead set against P cards. Are there other institutions where they've said no to P cards? Because that seems like a pretty slick way to, that adds a lot of value, it seems like.
Yeah, at Seattle colleges, we were told use your P card for everything, but my P card has a limit of 2,500. So anything above 2,500, I need to create a requisition for.
Anybody have a higher
I
limit?
think well, it's so the 2,500, that's a limit per transaction. And I believe that might be a statewide limit.
Yeah.
Like for all state agencies.
What
But
was-
they did raise the monthly spending limits on our credit cards because they were so invested in having people do as much purchasing with the credit cards as possible. And that's because with the credit card purchases, they could load those automatically into ctcLink. And then basically farm out all of the approval to the people making the purchases. Whereas if we were doing purchase requisitions for everything, we've got thousands and thousands of purchasing transactions a month, and purchase requisitions can only funnel through like the 3 people who work in purchasing. So. Oh, Lori says she thinks at Pierce, they have a per transaction limit of 3,000. So I could be wrong.
And I mentioned up in chat earlier, if anybody has a question where they'd like to share their screen to show something, or wants to speak to something and share their screen to show something.
I can stop sharing and let someone else grab it.
Oh, Grace Harbor has 5K per transaction. Kara Beth just has a higher credit rating, I guess, than George.
Yeah,
So Naoko, you've been quiet. You have some experience with this. Anything that you have to add or ask about?
Well, our workflow is very different, and I'm actually not the one who goes into ctcLink, and
I gotcha.
yeah, our acquisition person does that. So I can't really speak to the nitty-gritty of the process, but we don't create requisitions, we just enter vouchers.
So requisition is not required at Highline.
For the library.
Yeah, for the library, yeah.
Mhm.
Anybody else with that workflow? So do they pre-issue you requisition numbers or anything, or do you just use library generated ones.
The numbers are generated by ctcLink, so they're just sequential numbers.
Yeah, I was thinking for Naoko, who doesn't use where they don't require requisitions. Payment voucher is just, you know, basically saying here, pay this, right?
Yeah, it's actually, so our acquisitions person has access to the AP part of the ctcLink, so she actually doesn't have access to purchasing module. I don't know how to say that, different areas. So she's doing the accounts payables task.
Oh, interesting. So
In a way.
yeah, so they're like, she has authority to issue checks out of ctcLink.
Well, she doesn't issue, but I'm sorry, it's not
Yeah,
a
oh, no, that's
firsthand
right. Yeah,
experience.
But yeah, it may, yeah, she probably puts them in a queue and then they get reviewed by.
I think so.
Yeah, that's interesting. So there will be variation. Yeah, there is going to be variation between workflows, just like they are for library workflows. Any vendor specific things that people have run into? Like,
I know when I create requisitions, sometimes I can see in ctcLink, I can actually show you. Let me share again really quick.
and maybe this is where you're going, George, but an add-on to that question would be setting up vendors in ctcLink and what that looks like.
So they call them suppliers in ctcLink. And see if I look for EBSCO. It's actually this one. And if you look at, when you get to the supplier, you can look at location and you can see that Peninsula College has an account set up in ctcLink. The Grace Harbor has an account set up. Olympic has an account, and we should be number 6. So that I know that my Seattle Colleges has an account set up already with EBSCO and ctcLink, so purchasing and accounts payable can do their work with this account already set up in ctcLink.
Anybody run into issues with like there being multiple accounts in ctcLink for somebody like EBSCO? I don't mean, yeah, not sub accounts for different institutions, but like different EBSCO accounts. Or is it?
So
George, are you involved or
the supplier record in ctcLink? It's not exactly the same as a vendor record in Alma.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily have account numbers, like customer account numbers attached to it. It's mostly just information about here's the address and phone number of the supplier. So it doesn't have a customer account number linked to it the same way that an Alma vendor record has a vendor
Yeah.
account record.
Gotcha. Is there any friction in setting up new suppliers? Like if you have to buy from somebody new? Is that something that you guys get involved in?
If
Yeah, George, you talked to that.
if I can't find them and searching for a supplier in ctcLink, I just need to state that in my requisition and supply purchasing a copy of the W-9 tax form for the vendor. And then they can set up an account in ctcLink.
That makes sense. So unless it's some kind of giant amount or something that has to go out to bid, then they can for
Yeah, when they migrated, they took a lot of the vendors that we regularly pay for and they migrated those into ctcLink. It's only when a new vendor or just some oddball thing comes up that we have to ask purchasing to create a new account.
And for annual subscriptions, do you have to create a new requisition each year?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yes. Because they
Yep.
all of my requisitions are closed out at fiscal close on the ctcLink side.
What anything, what about something that's on a monthly recurring? Do you still have to, I don't know if you have anything like that.
Those are, I use my P card and no requisition involved.
Oh, I got you. Yeah. That makes sense. So it just gets billed monthly and then it shows up on your, on the reconciliation list for the P card.
Melinda, don't we have recurring monthly charges on our PRs that Paula takes care of?
And I could imagine that might be something that varies by institution. An institution may have chosen to set up like a recurring requisition.
Yeah, we created they called it a blanket requisition for some of our canopy. So we estimated we're going to spend this much in canopy, and we created a blanket requisition. And then when invoices come in, I would just send them to accounts payable because there would already be a requisition set up for payment.
Yeah, it's kind of like an open requisition. It's not necessarily recurring, but it's open, so you can spend against it.
Yeah. The problem there is like trying to figure out how much should I put
Yeah.
towards it.
So jumping back to something that George showed earlier, I just want to go back to that document status feature in ctcLink. That has been game changing for keeping track of, has this thing been paid? Is this thing stuck somewhere? Like, and you can get into that document status to see all the associated purchase orders, invoices, payments, like all of that stuff from any point in the workflow. So you can get into the document status from the purchase requisition or the purchase order or the invoice voucher or the payment. And yeah, that's been a huge help when we're hearing from our vendors, we don't have a check, we're going to cut you off. We've been able to go into this document status and see, oh, well, a requisition was created, but it never got turned into a purchase order, or the purchase order was created, but there's no invoice voucher. So somebody needs to get a copy of the invoice who doesn't have it, or, you know, or being able to check the approval status and see who needs to approve it, who hasn't yet. And then we can contact those people directly.
And one timely topic might be fiscal year close, since we're coming up to the end of the fiscal year. Is there a lot involved on the ctcLink side with that? Is fiscal close from the perspective of ctcLink just making sure that checks get issued before the end of the fiscal year that we want to get issued? Is there anything, do you have to think about what you didn't spend, or do you try to look in there and see how much you have left in the budget towards the end of the year and get it spent?
Yeah, right now we're trying to spend down everything all our budgets, trying to zero them out, because, you know, they're use it or lose it. So
Yeah.
And in our purchasing and accounts payable departments has given us strict deadlines, like the first of June was the last day that we could create a requisition and have a purchase order created. So we've passed that. We can't do that anymore. And then June 17th is the last day we can use our P card. And hopefully that gives us 2 weeks to allow everything to be ingested by ctcLink and hopefully reconciled and paid this fiscal year.
Yeah, in a way, that's kind of nice, right? That gives you strict deadlines, that so you know what.
But yeah, we're not really tracking budget balances in ctcLink because we're still kind of figuring out how to do that.
Right,
So I think
you're
a lot of people have their own external spreadsheets going.
But it was nice to see that one ctcLink budget balanced with the Alma budget.
Yay, George.
How does that compare to the old system? Would you have been able to do that in the old system?
Oh, an FMS query, yeah, we would balance to the penny.
I got you.
All right, so it's a little after 11, so I'm gonna wrap up and head out.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, thanks, George. Thanks so much for that. And thanks, everyone, for participating. I'm going to stop recording.